I am here with Lucille Williams. Thank you so much for joining me on the Journey of Ruth podcast today.
It's my pleasure.
So can you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Yes, I am currently married to a children's pastor. I have multiple books out that I'm really excited about because it's books about marriage. And my latest one is about parenting that I was able to do with my daughter, which is wonderful. It's The Impossible Kid. And she was my impossible kid. So she contributes at the end of each chapter, which is really exciting. I'm also a blogger and a speaker, and I've been doing ministry for like 30 years. And I love ministry. I love serving in the local church.
Yeah. So just so the listeners know, you and I know each other from church because your husband recently came on staff at Palmcroft, which is the church that we go to. So I know you're known around our house as Pastor Mike and his wife.
A wife.
Yes.
So
Yeah.
right. That's what I am. Mhm.
So, and I never know which character Pastor Mike is going to assume when I see him in the halls of our children's department, because he's either got a superhero cape on or some kind of mask or something crazy.
The man is pretty crazy. Yes.
Is he the same at your house?
Yes and no.
Okay.
To some degree, yes.
Okay.
But I mean, obviously, he's a grown-up person at home.
Okay.
And at church with the kids, he just has a real knack for being able to relate to children on their level. And I'll watch him interact with some of these kids. And in my mind, I'm thinking, this is so stupid. Like, I cannot believe he's saying these things and doing these things. Like, this is ridiculous. But the kids are cracking up. They're like laughing, and they're so engaged, and they just love him. And anytime I tell someone, a child, Pastor Mike is my husband, they're like, what? Like they get so excited. They can't believe that, they just love him. He's in that way. I don't know what it is, but he just really has a knack for kids.
And that definitely is its own talent, because I mean, I can sit in a group of little kids and entertain them for a little while, but that's a lot of kids. And you guys do these programs that entertain them for like an hour and a half, and not just entertain them. Let me go back on that, because you're not there to entertain kids, right?
Well, keep their attention.
Yes.
You can put it in entertainment, because you need to, if you want to teach children about God and you want to teach them what God says and that God loves them, you have got to get their attention.
That's right.
And sometimes there needs to be a level of entertainment, because they're going to check out.
That's right.
Kids don't put on that face like adults do, where they might be bored out of their minds, but they'll put on that face that says, "Oh, you're doing wonderful." Kids don't do that.
No.
If kids aren't engaged, they tell you, like, they'll be like,
That's very true. And I know that what you guys are teaching them is definitely getting in there, because I hear about it in the van on the way home, and I'm very blessed to have my kids at Palmcroft, because
that's wonderful.
I know that they're learning great stuff. So you are a mom, and you work in ministry alongside your husband, and you are an author and a blogger. I want to know, how do you find balance amongst all of those things? Because there's some of us wives out here trying to figure out how we can do everything and not drop the ball.
Yes, that's a really good question. And I have 3 kids. They're grown now.
Okay.
So now it's a lot easier. Although I do keep my schedule. I always make sure there is margin in my schedule, because I have grandkids now and I have kids. And I mean, just before we started this, my husband and I are headed to go see one of our kids who just had a baby. He lives in Texas.
Okay.
I just got a text from him, and he said, "Mom, if you want to stay longer after you and Dad are here, you could stay, because I know Dad needs to go back to work, but we'd like you to stay longer." And I just said, "Sweetheart, it would break your dad's heart if I didn't drive home with him, but I'm coming back soon. Like, I'm coming back soon." So I spent a lot of my time there with him. But when I was raising my children, I was extremely careful what I said yes to. I
Mm.
always wanted to make sure I was one that took them to school in the morning. I was the one that picked them up at the end of the day. If they needed me, I wanted to make sure I was available. And one of the things I did in my house, and I know this is going to sound really, really odd to people, but when I was considering taking something on, I would ask all three of my children, hey, I'm thinking about doing this. What
Hmm.
do you think? Do you think that I'll still have enough time for you and what you need and what our family needs if I do this? And any of my kids could veto my schedule because
Wow.
they were my, first my husband and then my children, they were my top priority.
Hmm.
So I made sure that my schedule reflected that they were my priority. And that's what I did. And I didn't get into the whole author thing until my kids were pretty much grown.
Okay. So the achiever in me, man, like my blood kind of starts to boil when you think about like everything that I'm going to do, I put it past somebody else because that means I'm giving them the chance to say no. Was there ever a time when you really wanted to do something and your family went, I don't think that's right?
I'm laughing because there's this really great story with our family that's been going that is just, there was this program at my kids' elementary school and it was
Uh-huh.
called Women in History. And
Okay.
I was all about it. And what happened is they'd give moms these scripts to be women in history.
Okay.
And so each year I would sign up to be one of the women and I would go into the school and be there all day and go through all the classes. And you went in and portrayed this person.
Oh,
So
cool.
my first year I was Deborah Sampson and she was in the Revolutionary War and she disguised herself as a man. So anyway, I mean, I just really got into it and I had blood on my bandage and the news came out and I was in the paper and it was just, I was like, then the next year I did it again. And then the third year I was Queen Elizabeth. I went to NBC. I got a full on Queen Elizabeth outfit. I mean, I was just totally just into this. And, it was funny. It was like the school was Valley View. I was
Mhm.
like the Meryl Streep of Valley View. Like I would get there and the teachers would be like, oh, this mom, they would call the news and say, you've got to come out here and see this mom. And I end up on the front page of the, newspaper one time.
Oh my
And
gosh.
I was so into it. But see, here's the thing. Here's the behind the scenes thing.
Hmm.
I would start early. I would get every written material, every movie, everything I could find and just get my hands on it. And I would learn that character. I would practice. I would be obsessed. I was missing dinners. I was just like, I was all about this character that was coming up. I just really threw myself into it. And I'm like, oh, my kids, they're so proud of me and all this other stuff. And they were when I was on the campus, like they were, that's my mom kind of thing. And so the year I did Queen Elizabeth, I was just on a high after it ended because it just went really well. And, most of the moms would go in the classrooms and just read off a piece of paper, but
Right.
not me. I had a whole shtick worked
Of
out. Like I go
course.
in there, I just did this whole thing. So after my third year reign, my husband asked me to come out on the front porch with the kids and he sat me down and he said, sweetheart, we need you to not do women in history anymore. And I just started crying. Unbeknownst to me, my little darlings went to their dad and said, Daddy, please help us. You got to do something about mom with this women in history thing. I mean, when I say obsessed, like I would get obsessed with it. And so I remember that. I mean, I cried because I loved it so much. It was like it gave me that mom identity. I was doing something. I was in the paper. My kids are so proud of me. But really what I was doing was just missing 3 months of their life because I was studying for these
Mm.
roles that took place one day. And I realized, I mean, my husband said, it wasn't like he said, you can't do it anymore. He just said, sweetheart, the kids came to me and this is, it's really hurting them and they're missing you through this time. And, we're asking that you don't do it anymore because you're just really obsessed. And this is when I wish my daughter was here so she could tell you what it was like from their end, because when the word obsessed is not even like half of it. So
Mm.
knowing my personality and how I am and how I jump into things like that, while I was raising my children in that season, I was just very sensitive to what, I mean, obviously it doesn't sound like I was very sensitive in that scenario, but I was just very sensitive to, I knew my personality and I knew how I, go full speed ahead on things. And so I was just very careful what I would take on. And that was a huge lesson for me.
Yeah.
So when you say letting them speak in, it was like that. It was like they had the right to say, hey, mom, this is hurting us. and they knew mom would listen. And that's the kind of relationship I had with my kids as they, grew up. They could tell me, mom, I need more time with you, or mom, you're being a little harsh with this. Or they could go to their dad and say, dad, you need to talk to mom because, and then my husband would go to my kids and go, tell mom she can't wear that. Like, I'm not real fashion. I'm not your fashionista. So he'd go to our daughter and go, hey, did you see what mom got at the store? Can you go talk to her? That looks really bad.
Oh my gosh. Well, you did write. So we're talking about your kids, but you did write a book, and I actually have it right here.
Yes.
So it's called The Impossible Kid:
Mm-hmm.
Parenting a Strong-Willed Child with Love and Grace. And
Mm-hmm.
some people might think, oh my gosh, you wrote a book about being, parent of a strong-willed child. But like you said in the intro, your daughter knew about it and she participated in the writing of the book. So it wasn't like you were, you know, telling on your
Mm-hmm.
daughter and then she'd be embarrassed or anything.
No.
So can you give us some insight into why you chose to write the book?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, my first two books were on marriage.
Mm-hmm.
And, we have a heart for children, me and my husband, obviously. And so I knew if I could help people's marriages, I would help children.
Mm-hmm.
But of course, parenting goes along with that. And actually, the idea to write the book was my daughter's.
Oh,
She just out of the blue one day, she was 17 years old. She's a lot older now. So that kind of gives you a window into how long it took to get this book published. But she's like, Mom, you should write a book about me. You've always said I was your toughest kid. And so you could write a chapter. And at the end of the chapter, I'll comment and say what I want to say. I was
hmm.
like, I just remember in my mind going, that's a terrible idea. Like, no one's going to want to read that. Like, I'm thinking, I don't think it's a good idea. But I didn't say anything. But then I started thinking about it. And I went, I think she might be onto something. Because for me, I devoured parenting books when I was raising my kids. I wanted to know what the experts had to say. I one after another, Gary Smalley, got Dr. Gary Smalley, one of my favorite authors, just loved his material. Kevin Lehman, another one, just awesome people. And what they write is just so fresh and new and just so eye-opening. Sometimes I'd read some of these parenting books and I think, what would the kids say? You can write anything in a parenting book. You could
Yeah.
say, oh, this happened and I did that and da 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 da, and it went so well. But what would their kids say?
Mm-hmm.
I always wondered that. Every time I read a parenting book, I thought, do they still have a relationship with their kids? What would their kids say about this thing that they did? Like, would they say that was productive for them and
Yeah.
fruitful? Or would the kids say, oh, I hated that? So then I got to thinking about my daughter's idea and I went, yes, I think it's brilliant because I can write my perspective and I can be free to just share what's ever on my heart, but then she can do the same. And so if my perspective's off, then she can come in there and, say so.
Yeah.
And you know what? That happened so much. There were times where I would write a chapter and I'd write about something. I'm thinking, oh, pat myself on the back. I was just really rocking as a mom when I did that and did it. And then my daughter comes in and goes, that was humiliating. I hated it when my mom did that. It was so humiliating. And so I'd read what she'd write and I go, honey, really? She's like, yes, like her first bra experience. I guess I completely humiliated her. I thought I was keeping it low key and I thought I was being the cool hip mom. No, she was completely humiliated.
Huh.
And so we found out things in the book. She found out things I was thinking that I maybe just
Mm-hmm.
never told her. And I found out things she was thinking that she, had never told me. And so it was so interesting to get her perspective. And as I wrote, it kept me so honest. I couldn't just kind of forge my way through it or fake it. It
Right.
was real because I knew she was going to come in and go, no, that's not exactly how it happened.
Yeah.
My mom's a little delusional on this one. And I knew she would. And she had the license to. That was
Hmm.
when we first started writing. I told her, I said, Monica, you have the freedom to disagree with me. You have the freedom to write whatever you want. I want you to be honest. It's not going to hurt my feelings. If this book is going to be true and authentic, you need to be real and you need to be honest. So don't worry about my feelings. Mom's a big girl. I can handle it. You write what you need to write and you go ahead and get it out there because, my mistakes can help other people. We all make mistakes when we're parenting, right? I
Yeah.
mean, I can't be the only one.
Yeah. So it's funny because, you're talking about how, like, you felt like some of your wins, if you will, were
Mhm.
embarrassing to her. But I'm
What
sure
I thought was a win. Yeah.
right, what you thought was when she's like, "Actually, that was not good. Not one of the crowning moments in our life." But I'm sh I'm sure there were a lot of moments, like stories in the book and moments in your parenting where you thought, "Okay, that wasn't a crowning moment for me either." Like, you were doing something and it was making me embarrassed. You know, what do we do in those situations, or maybe what are your suggestions to those of us still walking through this parenting thing? What do we do when we feel embarrassed, or when our kids are doing something and we're like, "Oh my gosh, I don't even know what to do." And the first thing we want to do is lash out or yell at them, or I mean,
Mhm.
in all of your years of
Yes.
parenting and now that you've
Yes.
looked at what your daughter thought was successful and not, what do you suggest we
Mhm.
do?
Yes, I have a lot of those, and I think that, oh, I have so many of those. I could just take the rest of our time and just tell those things, but our kids were great at just embarrassing us, doing things like my youngest, when he was around 3 or 4, he
Uh-huh.
decided to get a little vial and he collected his boogers in it. So he would walk
Oh.
around with this little vial of boogers and he would keep it in his pocket. Well, one night I'm delivering dinner for one of our pastors at our church, and he pulls out his booger collection, his prize vial, out of his pocket while I'm delivering this dinner. And he's like, "Look at my boogers." And I was like, oh, I was so embarrassed because I didn't really know this pastor very well. And, luckily the pastor said, "Oh, I've got one of those too." So at first I was really embarrassed, but then I was like, you know what? He's a kid. He's going to do stuff like that. And, you just have to just kind of go with it. And just because our kids are going to do stuff like that, our kids are going to do things that we're going to feel like terrible parents. I mean, that's just part of the parent's journey. Like they do something, you're like, oh man, who's that kid's parent? And, that's your first thought. And you just have to back it up and go, okay, they're kids. They're supposed to be making
Mhm.
mistakes. These things are supposed to happen. Don't be surprised when these things happen. They're supposed to happen. If your kids aren't making mistakes and fumbling and doing things that embarrass you and make you look like a terrible parent, you're probably not parenting very well, because that means that they're not making mistakes. And you want your kids to make mistakes, and you
Yeah.
want to be there and help pick them up when they make mistakes.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And so what you're saying is, instead of like having a negative response towards them, think about the situation, maybe not about how it's reflecting on us, but the way that
Right.
they're looking at the situation, that type of thing.
Right. You got to step back and you have to say, okay, how can I love them through this? Because when we
Mm,
fully love and accept our children through their junk, we are taking them straight to the heart of God,
hmm.
because
Wow.
that's God. No matter what we do, he picks us up and, gets us ready to go again and sends us on our way. And that's our job. If we're going to parent like God parents us, a big part of that is just accepting all of what our kids are, all their failures, all their mistakes, all of the nastiness, all of the things that they do that drive us crazy. We need to embrace those things and love them and help, just help nurture them through it, and then move them on to the next stage.
Mm. Yeah, and that's, I think, one of the challenges as a parent is seeing, when you're in the middle of a hard moment, how this is going to help you grow as a parent and help them grow as a person. It's easier to just kind of think about, or for me recently, it's been, what am I going to do to discipline this child,
Mm-hmm.
instead of what am I going to do to help this child grow.
Mm-hmm.
And especially with
Yeah.
my 7-year-old, he's growing in a lot of ways that
Mm-hmm.
aren't just like things like words that he's learning or whatever. It's like real emotions that he's working through, and
Mm-hmm.
big emotions. And
Right.
so sometimes sitting down quietly in those moments, my husband and I have found that those moments are more effective than like a brash, immediate reaction.
Right. Right. We need to respond, not react
Oh,
with our kids.
yeah. We need to
And
respond,
if
yeah.
you think about it, why do we discipline our kids? We discipline them to get them to go in the direction we want them to go in.
Mm-hmm.
So really, it's like, I don't look at discipline as punishment. You did this, so now there has to be punishment. My husband and I never approached it that way.
Hmm.
We looked at it as, okay, you look like you're going in a direction that's not good. You're making some unwise choices. And so what would natural consequences look like in the world? Because what discipline is we want to guide them to make good decisions. So if all it takes is you sit down with them and have a conversation and you have changed behavior, then why do you need to be stern? Why do you need to send them to their room or take something away? You don't need to. If all you need to do, if you have a child where you could just look at them and say, hey, this is not good for you, please don't do it. And they say, okay.
Yeah.
Why do you need to do anything more than that when they messed up? You really don't. So my husband and I kind of had a rule. I don't like to use rule, but a theme to our parenting. If one of our kids came to us and they messed up, like they're telling us, I stole this from you and I did this or I did that. If they were coming clean, there usually wasn't any consequences to it. The only consequences they got were like, if it was something at school, we weren't going to get them out of, having to go to detention or having to do a makeup assignment. I'm not going to go into the school and tell the teacher like, no, you need to remove that. No, we didn't do that. But if they came to us with something that they messed up on, that they needed help with, we didn't ground them, yell at them, get mad. No matter what it was, no matter the degree of how bad it was, we listened and we said, okay, what do you need from us now? How can we help you in this? And we help them walk through the natural consequences that, they had to go through. Because at that point, they're already feeling bad.
Yeah.
They're already beating themselves up, and they need a parent to love them through it at that point, not condemn them and judge them. And how could you do this? And, we didn't do that. Like, some parents go with the attitude of, oh, my kid would never do that. Mike and I, we weren't like that. We were like, okay, what'd they do? Like if someone said we need to talk, okay, what'd they do? Let us have it. Like, okay, what do you need from us?
Yeah.
Because kids do stuff.
Yeah.
They're kids. I hope they do stuff. I hope your kids are getting in trouble, because if they're not, then what are they going to do? Wait till they're 18? Like, I mean, everybody messes up. Better for them to, no, I'm not talking really bad stuff. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
But better for them to have their falls and fumbles when they're with you, when you can help them get back up and say, it's okay. Most of us, we all fail and we all have trouble and we all make mistakes. And Mike and I we tried really hard to be honest about our mistakes. Like if we made mistakes, age appropriate, we would tell our kids. Like if I had to go to someone and apologize, I normally would let my kids in on what I did and why I needed to apologize to that person and why I felt so bad about it. Because when you let them see, hey, I mess up too, and I'm still in process, then they're more apt to tell you when they're messing up. Yeah. So that's what I wanted. I wanted to hear what was going on. I wanted to hear what was going on in their hearts.
Yeah, and that's really being kind of, I mean, it requires a lot of vulnerability on our parts as parents. But you're right. You want them to know. I've heard that heard it said that you want to model for your kids what you want to see from them. So what it looks like to apologize, what it looks like, even for them to say, I'm sorry, what it looks like to own your mistakes, exactly what you're talking about. Another thing that I hear you saying when you're talking about like kind of punishment or them doing wrong is a lot of like one-on-one time and like sitting down. And I know that's a big thing for you, is that one-on-one time. That was a big thing in my house. Like my parents had what we call date night, like parent and kid date night. So my dad and I, we loved going to like Barnes and Noble or one of the other bookstores in town, and we would get a hot chocolate and he'd get a coffee, and we just like look at all the books that were around, because reading was something we shared in common. Sometimes my dad would take my brother to the batting cages, and then we would do the same thing with my mom. So my mom and I would go shopping or, whatever it might be. But that one-on-one time was really important for us to feel heard, for them to talk with us. And it actually helped in the dating aspect once we got older, because that
Mhm.
was my dad almost teaching me, hey, this is how a man should treat you when you're going on a date.
Yes,
So why is
absolutely.
that one-on-one time so important?
Well, I mean, just listening to you talk about it and seeing your face light up as you talked about your dad making time for you.
Mm-hmm.
Like it's such a beautiful thing. And, the more kids you have, the more challenging it is. I mean, we had three. I don't know how many your parents had.
3.
Was it three?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So it can't, you need to be strategic when you're doing that one-on-one thing. And my husband and I were very strategic about it. And we planned one-on-one things with each of our kids. He was more like he had to go to Home Depot and he'd say, okay, who's coming with me? And they all knew only one of them got to go. And they all knew it wasn't just going to be Home Depot. They knew they were going to go to Home Depot, hang out with dad. And then there was a pretty high likelihood dad was going to stop for a soda on the way home or something like that. And so they didn't go for the Home Depot. They went for whatever dad was going to do after, because if he had one of them, he would take advantage of that time. I was a little different. If they played a sport, I'd go in the backyard, throw the ball around. My daughter was really easy to get that one-on-one time in with her. I'd be like, hey, do you want to, come to Starbucks? Or I just go sit in her room and sit down. And what's funny about that is, it's funny when you parent, you think you know what your spouse is doing. But after Monica grew up and left our home, I found out that my husband used to go in her room and sit on her floor. And from the time she was really young, I don't know what I was doing, but he would go in there and he would just sit there and she would talk about her dolls or, age appropriate, whatever was going on in her life. And she'd talk and talk and talk. And he would just sit and listen. And they still have the sweetest relationship. Or, like I'll go out of
Mm.
town and I'll find out he's hanging out with our daughter alone and she's got 2 kids and a husband, So, we both were just strategic in finding those windows to do lunch or whatever their favorite things were. And we looked for it weekly. Like, I'm not talking like every 3 months or 4 months. Like we looked for it as often as possible, because I feel that when a child gets that one-on-one time, that's when you really get to hear what's going on in their lives. So that's when they're really going to open up and tell you. And, you have to listen and not react to things, because sometimes parents will make the mistake of they get that time alone and the kids will say something and the parent go, what you did what, or you like who, or you did what with that boy, and they just kind of lose it. And there were times where I would hear things and inside I'm dying,
Yeah.
I can't breathe. Like, I'm like, okay, breathe, just look, act like you're fine. I felt like I was going to die, but just be normal. It's okay. They're going to just, I'd be like, breathe. And I'd listen and they're telling me things. I'm like, don't react to this. Don't react. And then I'd finish my conversation with them and go in my room and get on my knees and be like, dear God, please help me. I don't know. What do I do in this? And then I would give it a little time and then maybe go back to them and say, hey, can we revisit that conversation? That boy
Mm-hmm.
that A, B, or C, or, whatever. But yeah, I mean, there were times where I would find things out and inside I was freaking out, but I was just poker face,
Mm-hmm.
just giving them the straight and nod my head. Well, that's interesting. My kids laugh sometimes because they know when mom says, well, that's interesting, that there's probably a whole lot more going on in that head. But she's just saying, well, that's interesting.
Oh, that's so funny. I see that too with my kids of they tell me things and then watch what my face does. Right?
Mm-hmm.
Like how is she
Yeah.
going to respond to this?
Yeah.
And or even just today we had something my husband said, "Why didn't you wash out the paintbrush after you did this?" And I'm like, well, I haven't painted. You were the last one to paint, not me. And he's like, "Really?" Well, I washed out the paintbrushes. 3 hours later, my 4-year-old goes, "Mommy, I don't know how that paintbrush got in the paint."
Now you know.
And I go, "Yeah, that is interesting, isn't it?" And I didn't, I said, "Yeah, did an accident happen? Maybe, did something happen?" He's like, "Yeah, yeah, not an accident." I said, "Were you curious?" He goes, "Like Curious George." I said, "Yes, like Curious George." And I said, "But what happened a lot to Curious George because he was so curious?" And he said, "He got in trouble." I was like,
Yeah.
You got to watch out for that curiousness, because it can get you
That's
in
true.
trouble. And he didn't get in trouble for it. It wasn't even a big deal.
Yeah.
But I saw in that moment of him like, okay, I'm going to admit to what I did, kind of. And then
Hmm.
I'm going to see what mom's response is. And my hope is that, is always like, if I don't respond big with that type of stuff, that when there is bigger things that they need to tell me about when they're older,
Hmm.
that they'll feel comfortable coming to
Hmm.
talk with me. Of
Exactly.
course, I'm not perfect and I overreact about probably way too much stuff. But
It's really hard not. I mean, even today, I mean, my kids are all adults
hmm
and they still are oversharers with me. And, one of my common lines to my kids, they'll say something, and I go, things you don't tell your mom.
oh, yeah.
Things you don't tell your mom. It's like, I don't want to hear that. Like,
Yeah.
ah, la, 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 it's kind of funny. So we kind of joke about it now.
Right. Can you talk about that transition? So, I have a 4-year-old and a 7-year-old. So that's
Hmm.
what I know. But there's got to be, some advice that you can give us in that transitioning in the relationship with your kid from like childhood to adolescence to adulthood.
Yeah.
And like even when we're talking about impossible kid or whatever,
Hmm.
you know
Yeah.
even your reaction or what you can do or what discipline you can offer, like, that all changes as they get older. What can you
Yeah,
offer
it
us?
really does. Yeah. I think as our kids age, their world is different than, I mean, even your kids, their world today is different than the world you grew up in.
Mm-hmm.
And when my kids were growing up, the world that they were growing up in was very different than the world I grew up in. And sometimes we really just need to listen and understand their world. Like I
Mm.
remember my daughter, I don't know where I got this, but when she started high school, she used to want to wear like flippy flop shoes to school.
Yeah.
And I don't know why I got this in my head that was like not appropriate. I'm like, you can't wear those kind of it's school. You need to wear closed shoes. Like, I had this. And then one day I dropped her off at school and I'm looking at all the kids and they're all in the flippy flop shoes. And I'm like, what an idiot I am. Like, what a jerk of a mom. Like, this is what all the kids are wearing. So I remember I sat her down. I said, Monica, I'm so sorry. I don't know. Mom's a knucklehead. I don't know why I thought it wasn't okay. I noticed all the kids are wearing those kind of shoes. And I'm sorry, but if you want to wear those shoes, go right ahead. And I remember she started wearing her slippers to high school.
Oh.
I'm like, whatever. She'd have a blanket and slippers and she'd get out of my car. I'm like, okay, whatever. If she's not embarrassed, then whatever, let
Right.
her go. She did great. She did wonderful in school. So, I mean, I can't complain about, her wearing slippers on campus. And other kids were doing that
Yeah.
too. So sometimes you just have to sit back and go, okay, is this about me or is this about my kid? And one of the things, like one of my goals as I raised my children, and when you're raising them, you're thinking, I just got to keep them alive today. The younger they are, it's all about just keeping them breathing.
Yeah.
And then as they get older, it's like I want to keep them from, not being in jail or not going to juvie or, not setting the house on fire and, things like that. But sometimes we don't think about our long range goals with our kids.
Mm.
And I had multiple long range goals. Most of them about, I wanted them to love God. I wanted them to serve God. I wanted them to know, they had a God who loved them and they can rely on. But I also had a goal of, I wanted a relationship with them when they didn't have to be around me.
Mm-hmm.
I heard about a lot of adult people with adult children. And, when was the last time you saw your kids? Oh, I haven't seen them in 3 months, or I haven't talked to them in 2 months, and that would break my heart. And I knew that's not what I wanted for my life. I knew I wanted I love my kids. They're like my 3 favorite people in the whole world outside of my husband. And if I want to spend time with someone, my kids are on my list of who I want to be with. I just enjoy them. They're just wonderful people.
Yeah.
And so I knew I wanted to have a relationship as, they aged. And so the older they got, the more I thought about, okay, how would I want to be treated? Would I want to be around somebody who's nitpicking me about what I'm wearing? No. I mean, yes, you're the mom,
Mm-hmm.
but we can do it in a way that's respectful and kind. And I mean, yes, you have to be the mom until they leave. But I kept in mind, I wanted to have a relationship with them beyond, them living in my house. Because really, you're raising an adult. Your child is going to have more adult years than kid years. When you think about it, at 18, let's just say they leave at 18 or even 20. At 20, they have a whole lot more years of being an adult than they're going to be of a kid. So really, you have a relationship with an adult. They're just not an adult yet. And so I always kept in mind, what did I want? What did I want that relationship to look like? And so as they got older, I made it a habit to sit my kids down and ask them, have I hurt you? How have I hurt your heart? How have I upset you? Tell me if there's anything I've done that's hindered our relationship. And so they were free to say, you know what, Mom, I thought you were really harsh with this, or this was unkind, or this wasn't okay. I let them call me out on my stuff. I
Hmm.
allowed them to do so. And I owned it. I said, you know what, you're right. And even if like I hurt them, but I didn't think I really did, like, I didn't like mean to do it or whatever. But if it hurt them, then I would apologize for hurting them. I'd say, I'm so sorry. I did not mean to, come off like that to you. Will you forgive me? And so I would go to them and ask them if I had injured their hearts in any way. And I did that on a regular basis with them. But a lot of times I didn't even need to ask because like they would tell me. Like if I did something and they thought it was like unchristian like or whatever, they'd come right out and say, Mom, that was so rude. You were so rude when you did that. I'm like, really? They're like,
Hmm.
yes. And, when you're open to your kids' input, not like, and you let them know, hey, I know I'm not perfect and I'm going to make mistakes, but I let my kids call me out on things. They still do. They still call me out on things.
Well, and I think that's a great thing. Once again, you're opening up that line of communication between you and your children. And you're also giving them a healthy place to talk about emotions.
Mm-hmm.
I've heard it said that kids are little bodies with adult size emotions.
Mm-hmm.
And if we don't give them if we don't help them understand the proper words to voice those emotions,
Mm-hmm.
then they get held in and they don't know eventually when they're a full adult, they don't know how to voice those and they don't know how to walk through those or have those conversations. By you having that conversation with them, they now know how to have that conversation with somebody else.
Right.
Yeah,
Right. And
I
I
think
would
that's
ask
wonderful.
them when they would do things that from our perspective seemed like this is bad. Like this is really bad. Why would they do this? I would go and talk to them and say, okay, help me understand this. Like I wouldn't
Yeah.
just, lay down the law, you're in trouble, you're grounded. That didn't come until we got a conversation. I wanted to understand what was going on. I would ask them, okay, what happened? What was the reason you made this choice? Can you explain this to me? Please help me understand what was happening. And a lot of times I was the one with the wrong perspective. When I would just stop and listen, I'm like, oh, well, that makes a lot of sense. Okay, well, I understand how you would see it that way, but this is how it's going to go from here forward.
So I've also heard it said that you should never apologize with a but.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I'm so sorry you felt that way.
But
But,
that
uh,
negates the apology. Yeah.
right. And so I've heard that, but then in parenting, that's probably one place I really struggle with that because it's like,
Yeah.
I'm sorry you felt hurt, but there's always a consequence for our actions. And you did X, Y, and Z. Therefore, I had to do. How do you apologize for like kids being
Yeah.
hurt without
Right.
using a but when really
Right.
actually like your actions were warranted?
Right. Absolutely. Well, the thing is, those are two separate conversations.
Oh, okay.
An apology is just an apology.
Okay.
Mom, it really hurt my feelings when, I don't know, fill in the blank, something we did, our kids upset, I'm sorry. I'm very sorry that, I did that, or I'm sorry you feel that way. Will you forgive me? That's it. And then later, if you need to talk about a consequence, that could be a separate conversation because if you say, I'm sorry that I hurt your feelings, or I'm sorry that I hollered at you, but you were driving me crazy. Like now you just negated, the whole apology.
Hmm.
And an apology comes with a period. You apologize, ask for forgiveness, move on, and then later talk about, the consequence of something if, something came up. It doesn't mean we remove the consequence. It just means, hey, I'm sorry that this happened and I'm sorry you felt this way.
Yeah.
Now, one of the huge mistakes I made as a parent was with regard to my kids' feelings. And I know that might sound funny because the way I'm talking, like it sounds like I was real in tune with their feelings and stuff like that. But my one of the things that I discovered with myself is, and it was mostly with my daughter, probably my sons too, but it came out more with my daughter when she became an adult. And that was when she was really sad or had really emotional things happening where she would cry or things would be rough for her, it would be unbearable for me. And so I would feel like I needed to fix it and I couldn't handle her tears. I couldn't handle her sadness. So I would be like, oh, no, honey, don't cry, because I couldn't handle it. And so I'd be like, no, don't cry, or it's not that bad, or let's smile our way through this, or like I would always try to like tell her how it wasn't that bad. And I really made a huge mistake in that, because what I needed to do was let her be sad. Go, yes, that's hard, sweetheart. I'm sorry. And I needed to deal with my own pain with regard to her pain. But what happened was I couldn't deal with it. When she cried, I couldn't deal with her tears. And so I would try to stop her because emotionally I couldn't handle it because it was too painful for me. So I tried to stop her feeling sad because I couldn't handle the sadness. And that's a terrible, terrible, terrible thing to do. I found that out later in therapy, but who knew? I should have found out sooner. But now, she's an adult now, and I'm a safe person for her to take her feelings to. And so if she comes and she's got something going on that's really hurtful and she cries, I let her cry. I have to tell myself, let her cry. It's okay. Yeah. It's okay if she's crying. Let her have her pain. She's fine. You don't have to do anything. Just let her cry. And I think that, I hope that if there's any parents listening, that if they get one thing out of today, is that if your kids are feeling pain, if they have pain and grief and sorrow and emotions, let them have those emotions. It's okay for them to cry. It's okay for them to feel pain, and just let them have it. Let them talk about how they feel, and don't try to stop it, because that's not healthy for them and it's not healthy for you. And that was a dysfunction in me that I tried to control in my daughter, and it wasn't good for her. It wasn't good. It wasn't good.
Another place where I think it's hard to apologize and not say but, or it's hard to allow emotions to be what they are, is if you are struggling with your children, there's another adult in the home, right? And so you are not working through these things with your impossible kid on your own, but you're not going to walk away without your marriage also being affected. So how do you deal with conflict within the marriage appropriately in front of your children, number one? And number two, when you disagree, which I think probably one of the things that we disagree on more than not is how to discipline and how much to discipline, right? How do you appropriately, and where do you appropriately have those conversations so that your marriage is not affected negatively by what you're walking through with your children?
Right. Well, I mean, some people are under the mindset of, never fight in front of your kids, and God bless you if you're those people and you can do it. God bless you. That wasn't me and my husband. Like, it just wasn't. And we did have conflict in front of our children, for sure. I mean, I would be lying to say that we didn't. What we did do in that, though, was if they saw us have a conflict, they got to see us make up. So they saw, yes, mom and dad had a conflict, but they resolved it. They're fine. If we resolved it and they weren't there, I'd go back to them later. And I would sometimes even apologize to them. You know what? I wasn't very kind to your dad, and I apologized to him already. And I want to apologize to you guys too, because you saw how I acted and that was not okay. And so, I'm sorry, but I want you to know that, mom and dad talked about it and this is how we resolved it. And then they know that everything's okay. So that's what we would do. If they saw us fight, they either got to see the resolve of it, or one of us would go to them after and explain how we resolved it.
Okay.
And because kids get their security on, they get up every day and want to know what the pulse of the house is.
Right.
How are
Yeah.
mom and dad doing? And if there's tension between mom and dad, don't think they don't know it. They know. They
That's true.
know. And if things aren't harmonious between mom and dad and they feel it, but no one's talking about it, that's the worst thing that you could do, is just that, they know it's there, but nobody's talking. Even if it's simple as, what, yeah, me and your dad are having a fight about shoes right now, but don't worry, we're going to fix it. And you don't need to worry about it. We're fine. Mom's just being a little stubborn right now, but we'll work it out. Kids need to know mom and dad are okay. And so that's where they get their security. And I would say in terms of parents, it's more important to be on the same page than it is what happens. Because if mom and dad are conflicting, that's going to be more harm for the child. The fighting between mom and dad is more harm than whatever the, discipline or whatever. Now, I'm not talking about like if one parent is being overly harsh, or if it, borders on abuse, then yes, the other parent absolutely needs to step in and say, this is not okay. And you need to do whatever you need to do to protect your children. I'm not talking about a situation like that. I'm talking about like, one parent thinks they should have dessert after dinner and the other one says, no, they're not allowed to have dessert. Well, fighting over whether or not they have dessert is worse than giving the kid a cupcake. Do you know what I'm saying? And
Yes.
so in our house, the big fight was, I didn't like our children having soda. That was just one of my things. I was just, and the kids hated me for it, but I just felt like growing bodies did not need soda. Well, dad loved to give the kids soda.
Oh, right. He
And
took them for sodas after Home Depot. Right.
exactly. So I would go somewhere and I'd come in the house, so he'd give them soda and then he'd go, don't tell your mom. And then I would come home and the first thing they'd say is, dad gave us soda. And, I could get mad at him, but what good is that going to do? This was his thing with his kids. He liked to give them soda. I'm not going to fight with him about it. It would have been worse for them if him and I were fighting over the soda than if he gave them soda. So I would be like, whatever. He gave them soda. It's not the end of the world. They're not going to die. I just didn't give him soda. He did. So he got to be the fun dad and I got to be the mean mom. That's fine. But, things like that. And I know that's simplified. But really, you could take that into anything. I mean, it's more important that you agree with your spouse because that's the pulse of the home. That's what's going to matter most to the kids, not, say, no, I think this. I mean, I could have fought him and said, no, I don't want our kids having soda and that's it. And I can't believe you did that. And da-da-da. I didn't do that. I was just like, okay, he's their dad. If he wants to give him soda, I'm just going to shut my mouth and let him give him soda. And it became a family joke because it was like, dad gave us soda. And they loved telling me.
Because they knew they were getting their dad in just a little bit of trouble.
Right.
Yeah.
They knew I did not want them having soda. They knew it.
And I think you're right. I mean, kids really feel that tension, even when it's not a negative tension. Like my husband and I, when my oldest was younger, my husband and I would be having a discussion. It wasn't a fight. It was just like a discussion about even something silly. It could be about like a theological topic or about whether or not the red shirt was a good idea. I don't even know. And he would walk up and he would go, guys. And it would be like, what? He'd go, guys, calm down. And we would have to get down on his level and we'd say, mommy and daddy are not fighting. We're actually kind of pretending or playing or having it. Because it'd be like, well, we're both talkers and we're both really loud. So like our house is loud. I wish it was like some quiet, peaceful household, but it's just not. And so like the two of us, we can get animated in a discussion. And at that point in time, he didn't know the difference between like fighting and an animated discussion. And so we had to help him understand, no, everything's fine. But there's a lot that comes up in a marriage. And when you have kids, it can be really easy. I've heard statistics say that, sometimes people will find that their kids grow up and they get out of high school and they go off to college and you're left living in a house with somebody that you don't know anymore. Because your life was so, so yes, it's important to not fight in front of our kids. But what about like, let's take the kids aside, our marriage.
Yeah.
How can you foster like your relationship, continue to develop your relationship in the time when you're also dealing with kids?
Absolutely. I think we need to remember the kids are going to go and it's just going to be you and your spouse.
Mhm.
And, the old, date nights, that's important, time together. There was another kind of a family joke. My daughter played softball and there was some benches at the end of the field that she played in. And at the end of the field, there was a couple making out in the benches. And when she finished her practice, she realized it was me and her dad. And she was like, she's like, oh my gosh, you guys are terrible. But we kept, things going. And I just know that like I would just kind of keep track. I don't want to say it's a wife's job to keep track of that, but let's be honest. If there's something wrong in our marriage, it's usually the wife that knows. The husband's like, are we okay? No, we're not okay. Why do you think we're okay? Oh, we're not okay. Like they don't even know. They really don't know. They think that everything's fine, but it's not.
Yeah.
And they really don't know. When your husband says, oh, really? There's something wrong. Like they don't know. But women, like we know, like we're relationship gurus. We know if something's not right in our
Right.
relationship. So like I would keep track, like I'd be like, okay, kid time, adult time. I needed to strategically, have time with my husband. And there was one thing I did when the kids were little. I established something that I called hot dog night. And, when funds were tight and we didn't have money to like, get a babysitter and go out, I'd start early in the morning and I tell everybody it was hot dog night. And what that meant to my children was they were going to bed early so mom and dad could have an adult night. But they loved it because I started early. I made them think like, lunch came at 11 instead of 12. I took them to the park. I ran them around. They were good and tired. I made them think it was later than it was. Obviously, they couldn't tell time yet. So they were younger.
Right.
They would get hot dogs for dinner, which I almost never gave them hot dogs. And I'd give them a little treat. And then they got to watch a movie. And then they were in bed before you could say, finish your hot dog. It was like, you're done. And then it was a night for me and Mike. And, I would get dressed up like we were going out and I'd make a nice dinner. And I told the kids, you come out, you're dead. And, we just had an adult night and we had a date at home. So when it looked like, oh man, it's been too long, my husband and I haven't really connected. It's been kind of about the kids. I just call everybody. Okay, it's hot dog night. Everybody loved hot dog night. Everybody. And Mike was always home early on hot dog night.
Mhm.
And the kids loved it because they got to watch the movie. They got the hot dog. But the key there, though, is you've got to tire the kids out. You got to do something
Yeah.
with them during the day that wears them out. So, they're good and tired. I wouldn't let them take naps that day. It was like, and I did special things that they normally didn't get.
Mhm.
So that to them it was special. So it wasn't like, oh, we're going to bed early. No, they were excited. It was hot dog night.
Yeah.
So I think it's just being when, before you have kids, you could be very spontaneous and, you could just be in your marriage and have a good time and things just come naturally and all of that. Once you have kids, forget about it. I don't know about other people, but generally that's not the way it goes. You have got to strategically make time to be adults and to nurture the marriage and to work together as a unit and be her Prince Charming and be his girlfriend and just really focus on each other and try to forget that you have children.
I love that. Try to, ignore that you have children. We do that some nights, we
Mhm.
uh have like well, ours actually sometimes come in the morning. And we wake up early and we go outside because our kids wake up early. I don't know why. But we go outside in our garden. And so
Mhm.
they can't find us for a while. So they think we're still asleep. And for a while, they were too small to open the back door. And we have
Mhm.
a specific lock on there so that they can't get outside because we have a pool.
Mhm.
And so they couldn't come outside. So literally, it was like, I know you guys are safe inside. All right, you guys have your toys. You'll be fine. But we're outside and we can just have a little bit of time in the morning before they wake
Mhm.
up.
Mhm.
But
That reminds me another thing my husband and I did when he got home from work. I always greeted him, but for the first 30 minutes to an hour, it was mom and dad talk time, and the kids knew that. And we would
hmm,
sit down and we would talk. And yes, they could have dad when dad was done talking to mom, but they didn't interrupt. They could sit nearby and listen, or if they wanted to come in the room and sit quietly, they knew when dad got home, mom and dad would sit and connect with each other and just talk and share our days. And I always knew that, my husband was going to give me that time when he got home. He was going to sit down with me. We would decompress, we would talk, we could focus on each other. But the thing that was so good about that is our kids saw that. It was like, no, this is time for mommy. Go play with your toys or sit there and don't talk. They knew it was mommy and daddy time. And, maybe even it was only 15 minutes or 30 minutes, but it was whatever it was, whatever we felt like we needed that day. And I think it gave our kids security. When they see mom and dad working together on the same page, communicating, that gives them security and safety. They need to know mom and dad's okay.
Yeah. Oh man, that's hard to get sometimes. That's a hard time at the end of their workday. Of course, that they come home. That's when kids are getting home from school. Dinner is being made. And there's a lot going on in the home.
Mhm.
If you're both working parents, you're both getting
Yeah,
home going, oh gosh, now we have to help our kids with homework and all of this stuff. So
right.
you're saying that, yes, there were probably 5 million things to do, but you guys prioritize that time
Right, right.
together.
I mean, maybe you can only do 10 minutes. Maybe you can only do 5 minutes. Maybe it's 3 minutes, whatever you can carve in there just to get, because I mean, think about it. Your mom and dad, they're the leaders of the home. They're
Mhm.
setting the pace. Do you know what I mean? And if your marriage is falling apart, if you're not connected, if you're not on the same page, what is that going to do to the kids?
Yeah.
So, we need to be connected and on the same page with our spouse so that we can now properly parent. Because if things are bad in the marriage, like some people think, oh, I just focus on my kids. I'm going to be the best mom I could be. I'm going to be the best dad I could be. But if your marriage is falling apart, that's going to affect your children.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. One of the quotes that I love in your book, it said, "As you raise your kids, you are influencing the world." And
Mm,
I know that there are people out there like myself, who are they're achievers, they're really driven individuals. And the home can seem a little bit small
mhm.
to us. And so,
Yeah.
what is your message to moms and dads, in that direction of the fact that we are influencing the world? What is your message to moms and dads regarding their marriage or their parenting, or they feel like they're failing, or even to the moms that are feeling a little bit trapped because the home feels
Right,
small to them?
right. Well, I fully believe in mom getting a break. I would try to take a trip once a year by myself. I go see my brother, go do
Mm.
something with a friend. I take off for a week just to recharge, regroup, breathe. Sometimes you just need a break. But when you're in that season of raising kids, like it's so important. If I just want to speak to your listeners now, if you're raising a child, you are doing one of the most important things you can do. It matters. Every talk you have, every night you put them to bed, all that stuff accumulates, and it will pay off. It is not in vain. And in Proverbs 31:28, it says, her children rise up and bless her. And that is coming. It doesn't feel like it because you're it, but that is coming. And then Galatians 6:9 says, let us not become weary in doing good, for at the proper time we will reap a harvest if we do not give up. And
Mm.
you need to know what you're doing matters. And if you're a mom or a dad, thank you for what you're doing, because you are raising that generation. You are raising kids to go out into the world and do amazing things. And what you're doing matters. It matters a lot. Some days it doesn't feel like it because you're, wiping snot and cleaning up poop and cleaning up, broken glass and scrubbing the carpet. But those things matter. Your kids are watching. And when they leave, you're going to look back on your parenting journey and be so thankful for all the things you were present for. Because once they move on, once they go and do their thing, you can't go back, and you're going to long for those days. So just be present now and be there for your children and enjoy them, delight in them. Every child deserves a parent who delights in them and enjoys being around them, no matter how impossible they are.
Mhm. Mm. And I mean, scripture talks about how our creator delights over us. And I
Mhm.
think sometimes I have to remind myself that it's those little times and those little things that are important to our kids. And it's
Mhm.
those moments where we could be frustrated or we could respond negatively, but instead we respond positively, or, maybe sometimes I feel like it's just like emphatic, like, okay, well, this was a bad choice. And
Mhm.
here's what we're going to do because of it, and you and I are going to go now have to go and do this because you made this choice. But
Right.
those little things, and for me, I feel like it's probably this for every parent, but I feel like it's a constant decision, constant choices, like of
Mhm.
being aware, intentionality, really, I think is the word.
Yes.
Like
Yes.
being intentional with what I'm doing, because it's probably what I need to do is not what I want to do or is my first reaction.
Yeah.
And you said, what did you say? We need to respond and not react.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
And that,
Respond to the situation. Yeah.
yeah. And that's
I
hard.
remember with my daughter, a lot of times it'd be like, okay, if you do that again, you're going to go to your room. So if you want to go to your room for the next 10 minutes, just go ahead and do that again. And that'll be your choice. And then, of course, she would do it. I go, okay, you just made a choice to go to your room. So now you're going to go to your room. But mom, I need to, no, you need to go to your room. You can come back out in 10 minutes. Then she'd go, mom, I need to talk to you. I go, okay, we could talk. But if it's about why you're in your room, you're going to get more time. Well, okay, you know what? Now you have 15 minutes. And if you keep talking, mommy's going to turn it into 20. So I suggest you go into your room. And it was just I go, okay, we're up to 25 now. Should we make it 30? It's up to you. I'm totally fine if you want to be in your room for 30 minutes. And so it was just, I was very clear on what the boundary was. I wasn't
Uh,
yelling at her. I was just saying, hey, I told you if you did this, you were choosing to now, I already let you know this is the consequence. And so you chose this.
yeah.
So I always made it clear this was your choice because you decided to do this when I told you if you do this, then you're going to be in your room for a while.
Hmm.
So if you want to keep yelling at me, that's fine. Then I'll just have more time out here because you're going to be in your room longer. And it would just go, and finally it'd get to a number where she'd be like, okay, fine. And she'd go in her room for whatever the time was, once it hit a number where she's like, okay, I'm done.
Right. We once had one of our kids that ended up having to spend the rest of the night, including he was allowed to come out for, I believe it was 10 minutes to eat his dinner, and then he had to go back in. But that's because he said, well, I just want to go in my room for the rest of the night. So we said, okay, then if that's your choice, then that's fine. But then, of course, he came out in 5 minutes, and we said, oh, no. No, you said the rest of the night. And he hasn't said that since then. But
Yes.
so none of us, you're talking about kind of uh, discipling your kids, if you will, or walking alongside your kids and helping them learn these lessons that are so hard. And none of us are meant at any point in our life to walk alone in life. So who is it? And we ask this question of all of our guests, who is it that helped you along in your journey to get to where you are?
I've had a lot of mentors and friends over the years that were ahead of me. When I was a brand new Christian, I had women in my life who were older moms. When I was raising my kids, I always looked out for older moms that were further along than I was.
Mm.
And I'd say, can I come over and see what you're doing? And I would watch and listen and say, okay, can you explain why you did it that way? I mean, not in a judgment or critical way, but just help me understand your process here. And how can I tweak what I'm doing? And, that kind of thing. So I always, I looked for older moms. I always look for people that are older than me that were further along on the journey. Just, different people. God has supplied different people to pour into me over the years. And I'm very thankful for those
Mm.
people.
Yeah, absolutely. All right. So where can we get The Impossible Kid?
Yes, it's in bookstores. Of course, on Amazon, Barnes and Noble, other bookstores. People are sending me pictures. Hey, look what your book is. And
Love that.
then, of course, my website, lusays.com, Lusays. Lou Says, that's my website. And I have a weekly newsletter that goes out. So if people
Awesome.
are interested in that, they can just find it. They can find all my books on lusays.com.
And you've got some of your blogs over there. You've got your other books available on that
Mhm.
website as well. Fabulous.
Right,
Well,
exactly.
thank you so much. I know I am encouraged because I think parenting, it doesn't matter your kids if they're an impossible kid or if they're a just slightly less impossible kid. We all have
Mhm.
challenges as parents. So thank you
Hard
for
job.
it is a hard job. Yes. So thank you for the advice that you've given to us and thank you for being here with me today.
Thank you for having me.